Hi everybody, I'm back to make another, and what I really hope is going to be final video about this Paul McCartney high expensive tickets controversy, okay? I think I've got the answer here. I think I understand it better, and I want to share that with you because I just made a video, the last one, where I talked about the ticket prices, and I called it something like uh, if Paul McCartney ticket prices are high, it may be not true, necessarily, something like that. Because I heard people that I knew personally, who paid around $260 in that vicinity for seats, and not all of them were way on the top in the moon on nosebleeds. And after I made the video, I heard from another person I know who actually got a seat for $183. It was a pretty high seat in the back, not good, but he was in for $183. So I'm a little confused because a lot of people had some pushback here. They said, this isn't true. This is just not true what you're saying, because I went on and I could not find any tickets lower than, say, $1,000, or, something. It was like impossible. Some people were insisting that the front row seats were sometimes $10,000, $17,000, $40,000. I didn't know what was true and what was not. I tried to do a little research, and I heard from some people I know who had the experience online of trying to order these, and they all told me Ticketmaster was between $35 and $2,200. Other people said it was between 30 something dollars at the lowest and 4,000 at the highest. So how we talk? How are we talking about 10,000, 40,000, 45,000? Well, I know how now. So I'm going to do a thing here. I'm going to quote one of my commenters, uh, Chris Lowry. Okay, and his name here, the handle he uses, Lowry 101. And if you go back to my last video, I pinned it to the top. So if you want to have a discussion with him, and if he's willing to talk to you, you can go to the last video and go to the top comment. So I want to tell you what he said, and this makes complete sense. There's something that I was really kind of unaware about called dynamic pricing. And I think dynamic pricing, for what I learned, sucks. And I think that there is cause now to be really pissed about the arrangement that was done for this particular tour of Paul McCartney's. And I think, and it's going to anger some Paul people, I think that Paul is partly to blame, and I'm going to explain it. So I try to be honest. If I find something was new and I have to eat a little crow and maybe admit that maybe I wasn't 100% knowledgeable on this, I'll tell you. Here's what Chris Lowry wrote to me. He says, the issue is that Paul McCartney and his management have opted into dynamic pricing. Just because one person gets seats for $200, it doesn't mean that someone else isn't paying $600 for the exact same seats from Ticketmaster. That's the issue with dynamic pricing. As the demand increases over time, the prices shoot up. The people who are lucky to get tickets within the first 30 minutes pay the lowest price, but the longer you're in the queue, the more you'll pay. It's the same with those $5,000 seats. They can theoretically shoot up to $40,000 due to dynamic pricing. The 40,000 people that were saying they were paying $40,000 were quoting from Ticketmaster, not third-party sellers. I claimed in my last video that it was the third-party sellers only who were charging $40,000, but now I'm finding out that indeed Ticketmaster might if the dynamic pricing goes up. So now people blame Ticketmaster for this, but it's not Ticketmaster's fault. It's Paul and his team who opt into it. Chris Lowry goes on to explain, Oasis had dynamic pricing for their European tour, and due to the controversy and the backlash over it, they decided to opt out of dynamic pricing for the American leg of their tour, so that the Americans ended up paying less than the Europeans as a result. But it does demonstrate the fact that the artists have control over this. Ticketmaster are not forcing artists into dynamic pricing. That's key, folks. He goes on to say, I have no doubt Paul McCartney is aware of this controversy because he follows Oasis, and it was a big talking point across the music world last year. He could have said to his management that he doesn't want to anger his fans like the way Oasis did in Europe, and so he wants to opt out of dynamic pricing. Okay, he could have done that, but he didn't. Okay, as much as I love Paul and he's my idol, we need to be honest as Beatles fans and call Paul out on this just as Oasis fans did in Europe. Ultimately, the buck stops with him. He's the boss, not anybody else in his team. If fans keep making excuses for it or using Ticketmaster as the scapegoat, then nothing will change. The buck stops with the artist, and they're the ones who need to be called out for this greedy tactic of taking advantage of their popularity to inflate prices. Now, let me close my computer screen here. If this is true, and it sounds logical to me, sounds like what's going on here with dynamic pricing, yeah, you got to blame the artist. And no matter what, I really consider it a crappy system. I do think it takes advantage of people. I mean, there used to be a time when you would have a bunch of set ticket prices. They were set at decent prices, within reason. And you had the choice to go to the show, and you would either go on the computer, or in the old days, if you didn't go on the computer way back when in the 70s or 80s, you'd go to the Ticketmaster, and it was first come first served. So I think the ticket prices should be decent, manageable, that a human being, somebody who's not rich, or somebody who's not or a lawyer or a doctor or an auto mechanic, anybody should be able to take a shot at it. None of this nonsense that the supply and demand, and whatever the market will bear. If the longer you stay in there on the computer and look for tickets, the higher it goes. It can go, and I've heard from another friend of mine that it changes. One day he saw tickets that were like in the $4,000 range for a certain seat up the front. Next day it went down to 3,000 something. Then the next day after that it might go up to 5,000. It all has to do with supply and demand and how popular a seat is at any given time. Bull, man, bull. So that's what I think about this. I hope I set this straight. I stand corrected. I stand corrected on the video that I made yesterday. I now think this is bull through and through. And I'm glad I had no part of this, because, as I said, this particular tour, I didn't try to go to see Paul simply because he's not playing anywhere close enough to where I live. If I get to see him again, I hope that this dynamic pricing controversy has swayed Paul to opt out of that particular routine. Thank you for watching.